Hello everyone, welcome back to Tesla Plays MaGMML 3. Time to read the judge commentary for number 137, where Nomad has gone before. It got a 12.2 in design, 9.0 in fun, 4.8 in creativity, 7.0 in aesthetics, 8.4 in functionality, and got a 41.4 total score. Good grief, Amelia Fallis. That's a lot of collectibles for a stage this small. Despite expectations, the two individual paths, high gravity and low gravity, converge into the same element if you go to their conclusions. Wait, it does? Instead, the extras are here to roll along the top, and the reason to go to lower path... Wait, hold on. I'm confused by this, hold on. Instead, the extras are scattered along the top, and the reason to go to lower path is for some of the tokens, since you can get all of the elements from going up. Huh, you can. That's interesting. I wasn't even aware of that. That's a bit of a shame, so the lower path is more entertaining level design. Mixing count bombs, fans, and high gravity together works surprisingly well. And I was mildly impressed with the part where you have to activate a wall of bombs, run away, and then jump over to the new hole to actually get through. Even managed to have a halfway interesting metal button, which makes me a little upset that it doesn't have a checkpoint after it. Repeat fights were out there welcome. Oh, wait till we get to the third one. The top path, by contrast, is basically just a bunch of low-gravity challenges, which have a tendency to be self-defeating thanks to low gravity. They also have some kind of pointless extra elements, like a quickly dying Quint or a star section with smiles, uplifting messages, and getting briefly stuck in the floor. Really don't have a lot to say about the upper portion. It doesn't seem to have the same level of care. In its current state, this place honestly just baffles me with its content to collectible ratio. Parsing it enough to get a useful review out proved to be a real challenge. Personal recommendation? Should just focus on the bottom path. There's a lot more going for it if you ask me. I like the top path better, though, in terms of design. Shinryu, 23 of 100. Mick also, it was 37 of 100, sorry. While this definitely isn't the most confusing level in the contest, sure got thrown off by the odd level progression here during my first playthrough. Even after figuring it out though, it's almost nothing to this stage. Besides the odd level structure, all the room enemy layouts are incredibly easy to deal with. The only really noble thing I can think of to bring up is the Quint fight. Mostly the question why it had to be done for one of the energy elements here. It would have been far better suited as a one-off gag or Easter egg. Granted, it's a gag that's been done several times before in other levels, but at the very least it wouldn't have eaten up an element slot, and thus forced us to replay the stage another time for full completion. Other than that, I noticed that when teleporting into the room, it leads to the third energy element, you get stuck in the floor briefly, so there's that, I guess? That's interesting. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I got nothing else. It's just a very oddly put together, largely empty stage. Patchy, 60 of 100. One small step for Mets! As expected from the 3-element count, this level was fairly non-linearly designed, but mercifully is overall not a very big stage. That being said, the level kind of suffers from a lack of challenge progression and polish. While each of the paths does offer somewhat its own coherent theming. For example, the top path being entirely played in low gravity, the rooms don't really get designed around that gimmick, as they are vastly empty spaces over more empty spaces. The gravity flipping on occasion is strange. Some of the room layouts seem to hint that there might be hidden paths you can use the gravity flip to get around to, but most often they only lead to dead ends. The lower sections aren't all that impressive either, using common gimmicks like time bombs and fairly generic platforming challenges. Some misplaced collision objects in spots too that demonstrate a lack of polish in the stage as a whole. There is that wacky encounter with Quint with a whopping 3 health bars to boot. Thankfully his reign of terror was stopped as he was given a severe weakness to water shield. And laser trident, but it's nice to know there are multiple options. Flashman A5, 37 of 100. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the super fighting robot Mega Man. His continuing mission? To explore strangely laid out worlds. Take out new life-threatening situations, and completely bypass them with Rush Jet. To blindly go where tokens have gone stored. Nice. Roll intro credits. Captain's log, stardate 20XX-1374. A routine scan of a nearby space station detected. 3 energy elements, usually a sign of an overambitious civilization expanding out of control. I beamed over to investigate. The station was unremarkable in appearance, offering no clues as to its purpose or owner. I intercepted a few audio transmissions. One was boisterous and grating. Another was a familiar sports anthem that was unexpected but oddly fitting. Different varieties of metal defended the station, but I noticed they tended to avoid interactions with each other. And with the station's various environmental hazards, only the largest metals in a high-gravity hallway offered any novel or memorable resistance. Paths branched and looped back on themselves unpredictably, with directional restrictions that limited the enjoyment of exploring a maze. I felt disoriented and occasionally unprepared for the difficulties ahead. One path took me into an alternate universe that seemed to exist only for a cheap chuckle. Wonder if all the robots I spoke with came from there. They seemed so at place here, and they tried so hard to make me laugh, while explaining things I would have rather discovered for myself. I'm lucky I survived the trip. The poorly constructed teleporter deposited me halfway into the floor. In retrospect, I should have been more wary. Spotted more than one instance of shaky construction on the station. I returned with all 3 energy elements and one lingering question. Was the creator of the station truly a lunatic, or simply another builder without a cohesive plan? I appreciate the attempt at doing the Star Trek thing, honestly. It adds a lot of flavor to the commentary. Though, to be fair, it is still a lot to read. Still great, though. A-Spark, 50 of 100. A level this linear should not be this confusing to navigate. Multiple paths pretty much meant most of the time I was looking for said alternative paths, rather than paying attention and having fun. Very much led to the detriment and ultimately killed any flow the level might have had. Most of the time there wasn't even much point to them, especially given it's a pretty generic level overall. Gravity, count bombs, and mats. Stage elements we've seen a lot, even just within this contest alone. That all said, the level is fairly well tiled and doesn't look, say, bad aesthetically. But using things such as the base dev kit, Yoku block graphic, a rather large amount of tile cut off in places where you were lacking a tile type do make it look very unpolished. Stupid phone. The lower route with the graphic changing needed visual cues to make it obvious where and what happened. An audio cue alone is not really enough. The jump through platforms also aren't telegraphed well enough, which can lead to confusion when similar looking tiles are used as solid. That said, I have to say, the lower gravity does make Met significantly harder to deal with. It's always nice to find a bit of spice to otherwise overused enemies. That praise does not apply to the Metal Puton / Yoku block combo. It was just plain tedious if you tried to buster only, and the mets and spawns are a real nuisance. I didn't have a problem with them, to be honest. There are definitely cases where your placement of things lead to glitches, or getting shunted into terrain, and the teleporter for the third element placing you within the ground was just sloppy as hell. Metal Daddy is a bit of a weird case. Not sure if its changes make it a more novel fight or not. The fight is clearly harder, but isn't in such a way that's unfair. The new starting health is just really strange, though. And on that topic of the other past boss, Quint. Best way to describe my reaction to this is, meh. The trope of boss looks super powerful but is failed in 1 or 2 hits is overdone to death, and here it's done with dev kit assets. As such, becomes even more formulaic, predictable, and thus thoroughly eye-roll inducing. Especially doing this with everyone's punching bag Quint. I don't think there's any real way of handling this with just a dev kit. At this point, it ends the level on a damp squib rather than anything approaching an acceptable climax. Even with 3 elements, I can't see it outstate its welcome, but it's all rather too basic. Never really justified the extra routes. Quint especially was an unwelcome addition, focusing on the core portions of the stage, rather than spiraling all over the place. It's the only real way you can explore elements rather than just plop them down to make a bare-bones mediocre stage. I mean, I thought it was fine. It was a bit chaotic at times, but still, at least I didn't have a hard time with it. Stolen Citadel. It got a 12.2 in design, 7.8 in fun, 4.6 in creativity, 7.6 in aesthetics, 9.8 in functionality, and got a 482 total score. Mick, 42 of 100. A remix of Cossack 3 staffed with Mega Man 6 enemies. That's an interesting thematic choice. Unfortunately, while the level's design is serviceable, it's too short to really do anything with it. The main criticism I have, besides the length, is how quickly the place ramps up. In virtually no time at all, it dives into multi-enemy encounters with Panditas, Coltons, Tetaboos, and who knows what else. Unfortunately, not only does that lead to a lot of projectiles on screen, the quick ramp-up deprives the experience of some variety. The Cossack platform room, by contrast, is much more low-key, but it too barely changes as you advance, being mostly just platforms with the odd Tetaboo or Caterpillar. Okay, so I was right. It's short and to the point, which is something I can respect, but this place just doesn't do enough to really be memorable. Router 2 exists at the end. He's at least a little different, but he absolutely doesn't make up for the level. For all, this needs a lot more work. Shinryu, 18 of 100. This is basically just a small corridor with enemies, followed by a short segment with Cossack platforms. That's it. There's virtually nothing else this stage other than those 2 parts and then the boss. As for how those 2 short segments play out, first one is packed with way too many enemies for its own good, none of which really get any proper introductions, and are all basically thrown at you in rapid succession. A large group of enemies, contrary to what some might say, can actually work well in moderation, provided those enemies are properly spaced, and are small squishy enough to give the player an edge over their sheer numbers, with Tellies being the main example of this. Here, most of the enemy choices are either bulky, have mid to high HP pools, or have shields. Now, if we were dealing with some of these in more carefully constructed rooms, that likely wouldn't be an issue. Dealing with all of them at the same time, though? That's way too much. The Cossack platform section following this is some more thoughtful enemy placement, but it effectively just repeats the same setup using Tetaboos and Caterpillars each time. It's also a rather annoying setup to go against at that, seeing as you have little room to avoid the Tetaboo's arcing shot at first. Then you need to make sure you're at the proper elevation to shoot it once it raises its shield. Wouldn't really blame anyone for over-abusing Laser Trident or Tornado Blow for this part, especially once the Coltons get thrown into the mix. As for the end boss, while I appreciate the effort in trying to make Rounder 2 more interesting, there still isn't much substance to them. Their paths taking up the entire room might be a bit awkward to deal with at first. Once you realize it's just a matter of sticking to the middle and right-hand platforms, only jumping to the other when a Rounder is approaching from the opposite side, This fight pretty much has nothing else to it. Overall, there's really not a whole lot to this stage. I can at least recognize there was effort put in here, but it ended up being way too short and repetitive. Patchy, 53 of 100. Put that Citadel in the bag. Get it? Because it's stolen. A fairly short stage with a few screens littered with projectile enemies. Noble idea, but sadly that alone doesn't really make much of a stage. The first few screens can get pretty overwhelming with all the bullets arcing about. Enemies are also prone to respawning from getting knocked back and forth off of screens. It is much easier to take the upper path to get rid of the pandas. It's a neat consistency touch to using only Mega Man 6 enemies due to the little story involving Mr. X. The aesthetics faintly resemble Cossack Citadel, but they could use a bit less empty blue sky of nothingness. Though, we aren't bound by hardware limitations anymore, after all. Second half of the stage is nothing but Cossack platform hopping, while dealing with some cannons every now and then. Get pretty boring and or tedious if you want to get thrown into the pit after redo the entire jumping section again. The boss is a little wonky with its unclear hitbox and the sudden unpredictable direction changes, but otherwise a fine fight overall. Flashman A5, 41 of 100. Smashing together enemies from one game, a level from another game, is a stroke of genius. I'm super bummed that the design here doesn't do the premise justice. The level looks promising enough at first. A text box that gives the level some flavor, perfectly appropriate introductory challenge, and oh geez, enemies everywhere! What even is going on? Help! There's too many of them! Why would this section end? Gotta skip everything with Rush Jet! Oh look, a checkpoint. Yeah, I don't blame him. Second half of the level is better, though the pacing is somewhat slow and the challenges are fairly repetitive. Recognize that effort was made to craft a challenge progression, to combine elements meaningfully. Experimenting more with enemy positioning and level flow would have helped the section to really stand out. Well, the bosses who could have usurped the Cockroach Twins room, Murder 2 was definitely the best choice. Not so sure about the Sheepman blocks. Cossack platform, which the player's already seen, will have sufficed, or even entering through the ceiling to avoid the platform problem altogether. Disappointingly, due to the lack of invincibility frames, special weapons in the battle end the battle almost instantly. It's thoughtful that the spikes explode when the boss does, but it's either an oversight or a misguided softlock countermeasure to allow any spikes to remain. Overall, the level needs more restraint in the first half, more read any power-ups, more background graphics than a lone onion dome, more places for the player to rest. Digital screen transitions would add natural pauses, break up the long scrolling sections, more focused theming. Enemies from Mega Man 6 are a good start, but the assortment feels haphazard, and there should be some auto-scrolling to fully capture Mega Man 4. A-Spark, 56 of 100. First half of the stage is probably its lowest point. It's crowded, messy, and whilst the top path is significantly less irritating than the lower, either way you're probably taking damage. The Hotchkiss flying above the stage, acting as a pseudo-like it do, Super Mario, is a particular nuisance. Enemy and gimmick placement gets much more thoughtful towards the second half of the stage. That is, to a player that doesn't go in half-cocked. Honestly, I really can appreciate the timing challenges here if you go Buster only. It's not too difficult, and there's a steady difficulty curve. Dare I say, I found this segment fun in its own way. The foreground is reasonably tiled. In fact, after comparing the two, pretty much nails the Cossack 3 tile layout style, which is a neat touch. Unfortunately, the background, being almost solid blue, leaves much to be desired. I'm aware the Cossack 3 dev kit tiles are missing the clouds, but there are plenty of other tile sets with clouds in the dev kit. I'd say this would have been a good place for some more improvisation, but oh well. The easy fight against Rounder 2 is easy enough. It was appreciated actually trying to give a dev kit boss a new challenge, but the layout makes it rather punishing. The boss ends up resolving around sitting in one reasonably safe spot, but where also getting hit does not knock you into the spikes, and jumping around her occasionally. Not really engaging, but once again the effort is there. I think the entire room should have been erased upon defeat of the boss, rather than just the spikes, as it's rather unfortunate that poor luck can stick the energy element in an unobtainable place currently. Oh, that's bad. Yeah, I basically used Rushed It by the end, just because I have very little patience for challenges where I'm always at risk. So if I can cheese it, I usually will. Military Training Grounds. This got a 13 in design, 9.6 in fun, 4.0 in creativity, 7.2 in aesthetics, 8.4 in functionality, and got a 42.2 total. Mick, 42 of 100. If these are supposed to be training grounds for military robots, why are there so many Dr. Wily symbols? I don't think the level is being honest with me. Yeah. Silly commentary aside, the first thing to really say about this level is that it's very focused on combat. The occasional bout of platforming to avoid spikes. It's not a bad thing by itself. There have been pure combat levels in MaGMML before, and they've managed to work reasonably well. Plus, I do have to give some credit to the enemy variety. You don't see GSQs and Parasisis together that often. The fact that Hell Metal DX wasn't a pain in the rear in this go-around is something I could commend. Are you sure about that? Unfortunately, there's a reason why MaGMML rarely has levels without a few more gimmicks in the toy box. MaGMML levels, by and large, carve their identities through distinct aesthetics, unique gameplay. That is not present here. It's just enemies and spikes, nothing else. This level doesn't have enough going on to be memorable. Most of it just runs together into a mesh of nothing. It's not unfair, or even truly all that difficult. I would disagree. The worst thing I could say is that the number of checkpoints compared to spikes is too harsh. There we go. For my liking. Otherwise, the main issue about it is that it's really hard to remember much of anything about it. Definitely not the worst thing I've ever played, but it needs work for sure. Shinryu, 36 of 100. For a place that's meant to be a military-grade obstacle course, that ended up being very easy and quite boring. There's not too much to talk about here, other than the sheer lack of gimmicks, and the mostly basic level structure. While the enemies are introduced and laid out well, some of the platforming around them is decent, it's not enough to really make the level feel engaging as a whole. Really could have used some gimmicks to make things more interesting. This is now very little in this stage that actually sticks out. The only really noble segment I can think of this level is the first token room. And that's mainly due to it being the one part that's actually somewhat difficult, thanks to tight jumps and spikes everywhere. Other than that, there's not much else to discuss, other than maybe the odd banning of certain weapons here. Yeah, that was annoying. I don't really understand the decision behind disabling Spark Chaser, Tornado Blow, and Magnet Beam for this level. Maybe the tokens that require you to use Rush Jet would have been easier with them? Even then, I don't think that would have hurt the level as a whole. You'd still be using a roughly similar method for obtaining the tokens either way. It's just my take on it, though. Patchy, 15 out of 100. Move your legs, soldier. It's a fine, short little level. Not too difficult, plays nicely for the most part. Though it feels like the level gets progressively easier the further you go somewhat. The amount of tricky jumps and death posts towards the end is fewer than the beginning portions. It also seems like it's much less populated. It's most noticeable with the token side pass. The first token is you navigate through a bunch of spiky maneuvers, while with the last token you only need to use Rush Jet through 2 spikes that are fairly out of the way. Props for proper enemy introductions. I like the screen where you enter there are 2 parachuting enemies swooping down. Well, you have to lure away the lob shot from the cannon. Not sure what's the deal with the empty corridors before the boss. Doesn't seem like they're there for building up tension. Also, the aesthetics don't exactly match with what the title's implying. It's really mixing the Wily stage tile set with a few Stoneman tiles here and there. Training ground for Wily's robots, I guess? Flash in the Dark doesn't exactly scream military either. Maybe could have borrowed some assets from Commando Man. The Metal Daddy fight at the end is a somewhat unique choice for a boss, but the changes to the arena don't really change the dynamics from the original fight of Mega Man 4. Ceiling spikes are irrelevant, and the pits at the side are too narrow to make an impact. I didn't even notice that that was a difference. Flashman A5, 54 of 100. One of the keys to a good level is having at least one element that's truly memorable. By the time I played every entry for this contest and started replaying them all, I had no recollection whatsoever of this level. That's not to say the level was bad, rather it lacks a necessary punch. The aesthetics look fine enough, but don't really tell a clear story. Music and tiles from Mega Man 9, Wily 1, plus comparatively over-detailed Stoneman tiles, thickly resembling the rocks from Mega Man 9, Wily 1, equals a level that feels like Mega Man 9, Wily 1. Initially I got no sense of military or training. Only a modest metal theme with Wily logos out the wazoo. In retrospect, I can see paratroopers, tanks, and soldier helmets. But why ignore the militaristic dev kit assets from Mega Man 5 and Mega Man 10? I'm also unsure what the architectural goals of this level are, just below the boss gates and empty screens. In terms of challenges, everything is fair and introduced well, yet the difficulty and complexity never increase beyond the initial learning curve. Enemy use is safe and unremarkable. Distant checkpoints and unevenly distributed health weapon refills account for a lot of the difficulty. Things start getting interesting when spikes are involved. First token is genuinely good, and the simple addition of 2 floor spikes to the boss fight is an invigorating twist. Metals in the first mini-boss fight can enjoy a fall to the destructible floor to their doom, and players can join them later when mistaking a bombless pit for a screen transition. I don't know that it was entirely necessary to disable any weapons, but it's fun to figure out how to enter the E-Tank room, which totally should have had a token. Hopefully no one will get stuck in there with low weapon energy, or knows how the screen continues scrolling beyond the wall. And a spark, 20 of 100. This level doesn't do anything particularly egregiously wrong or right. It's a run-of-the-mill, rather mediocre, unpolished, and fairly generic stage. What I could otherwise say here, I've said elsewhere. But that is to be expected, because this rather looks like a first attempt at Mega Man stage creation. Let's get something straight. I'm not here to mock, or be mean, or cruel. I'm just a mutt who has been somewhat obsessed with this franchise for many years. But here I'm going to identify and address a recurring issue throughout this contest. People using Wily stages as reference. This is, in my opinion, a mistake. Probably because they're a generic laboratory. Anything fits in them, and so a stage resembling the NES Wily levels is easy. The truth is, these stages are often made at the end of development, and most of the effort went to making spectacle bosses. The stages? Oftentimes the developers are starting to run out of money, time, or cartridge space. Or with Mega Man 2, all 3. There are exceptions, but interviews have mentioned this to be pretty much the case across the series. Whilst referencing Robot Master stages is a much better idea, avoid the earliest games. Still good games, but showing their age now. Mega Man 2 was developed in the dev's spare time. Capcom, the fools, had no faith in it. It's good for such an early NES game, but it shows the growing pains, and developers fighting against the NES's limitations rather than mastering them. Inafune described Mega Man 3's development as particularly turbulent. The game was basically released, rushed, and unfinished. They even lost all of Top Man stage to a computer crash, and had to quickly make a new one. Later games refined the formula, and part of the reason this franchise has kept going continue to try out new things and levels. Are you going somewhere with this? For the record, if this is a first effort, the fact it's basically just an unpolished Wily stage shows promise. The first recommendation is to explore the franchise, and by extension, the dev kit. There is a reason we remember the Robot Masters and their stages. Okay, I know you were attempting to have a point with that, but it started to feel less like a review of the stage and just a critique on, like, the Wily stages themselves. Which, gotta say, that's probably not a good take. I mean, he's not exactly wrong on any of his points, but that's not really what he should have spent most of his time talking about. Anyways, teetering over the edge. This got a 13.2 in design, 9.4 in fun, 4.8 in creativity, 5.6 in aesthetics, 9.6 in functionality, 42.6 total. Mech, 38 of 100. This level gave me a very odd first impression. No idea what to make of that music. Anyway, at first it seems normal. If anything, it's really dull, focusing its efforts exclusively on simple enemy challenges, most of which can be annihilated with the Buster and good aim. It can also be the only part of the level you actually play if you end up fighting the hidden teleporter. Which, not sure how I feel about that. After the checkpoint, we have the most precarious teeter-totters known to all mankind. Attached to railings that look like they should be solid. The seesaw section is the most involved part of the level. It's also really easy to mess up and die in the tiny platforms. There's a reason my Blade Man preferred spikes under his seesaws. It wasn't just because they were pointy. And after that, the level just ends? Kind of a neat concept, but this was bare bones in a lot of ways. Credit to Skullmet for being an effective turret, at least. And Giant Lyric for the sheer what the fuzzry barbecue factor. That was pretty silly. Otherwise though, this was just there, which I guess is better than making me want to punch something. So, yeah, that's definitely another moment where I use Rush Jet. Shinryu, 22 of 100. This felt like less of a full stage and more like a small showcase of the Blade Man seesaws. One which didn't even do that much, for that matter. The only one semi-interesting thing about the stage, even then this is a bit of a stretch to call it such, the enemies are positioned to land on the seesaw as you ride it. That on its own could have been worth exploring for a level theme. Maybe even have the enemies trigger the seesaw platform for that matter. Doesn't really work here though, given their only real purpose is to knock you to the pit below. Beyond that, I honestly don't know what else to talk about with this stage, given just how unfinished it feels. The giant lyric out of nowhere was kind of funny. The seesaw rails looking like solid ground really threw me off at first. So there's that, I guess. Sorry, I've got nothing else for this one. Just a very empty feeling level around. Patchy, 53 of 100. Safety rails, not included. This level has a certain cute charm to it, probably because of the whimsical music, and the simplistic level design. The beginning half of the stage is rather lackluster, but still serves as a fine way to introduce the enemies that be used throughout the stage. That being said, the whole teeter gimmick could have been handled better. You need a less confusing texture for the intangible rails, for one thing. Also less reliance on getting hit once and be knocked all the way into the death pit kind of challenges. Nice giant pixely lyric at the end, that was weird. Gyroman is an appropriate boss for the stage, being somewhat sky-themed. Overall, not very much going on with this one. Flashman A5, 62 of 100. Between the cheery music, plain graphics, and simple challenges, first thought was, kid-friendly NES shovelware? Level grew on me after a while, though. Enemies are introduced and reintroduced at a steady pace. And the main gimmick kicks in once everything else is suitably familiar. Granted, the opening stretch is dull, even for a safe introduction. More varied architecture is warranted. The first skullmats and curlingers need a little bit more space to safely and completely communicate how they operate. The first seesaw track is unforgiving. Still, there are well-timed power-ups to help the player through the first half, and the midpoint is right where it needs to be. Second half is tense, but fair, cleverly balancing fast combat with careful platforming. I would have added spikes below the first few platforms as a sort of safety net, small weapon refill towards the middle, and some deterrent to bypassing the whole thing with Rush Jet. The enormous lyric is a hoot, and the obligatory big hopper at the boss gate pairs nicely with the bombless pit to the left. Add Gyro Man and his intriguingly uneven floor to the mix. You've got a satisfying end to the level. The secret area is cute, but the construction needs major tidying. The teleporter is a bewildering surprise. The background desperately needs clouds, or a color gradient, or something. Seesaw rails are a good start, though they look solid and decidedly are not. Rest in peace, me. The foreground, however, is pretty neat. Appreciate the use of eye-catching architecture rather than fancy tiles to punch up the aesthetics. All in all, this is a pretty decent level. What it lacks in flair and polish, makes up for in heart. A-Spark, 30 out of 100. Well, he wasn't happy. So this level is playable. Starts to pick up a bit towards the end as you start to encounter falling seesaw platforms and curlingers, giving a legitimate and earned sense of danger at an otherwise fairly tame stage. After some consideration, I even like the large lyric, doofy as it is. But the stage just feels very sloppy overall. Many enemies have little thought to their placement, and many of them legitimately cannot hit you. Some of the jumps feel very haphazard, especially when getting off the Snake Man Cloud platforms. Aesthetically, the pure blue background makes the stage feel so empty. At least the foreground is consistently tiled. But worst of all, what few novel challenges might be there get repeated and copy-pasted immediately afterwards. The stage is just dull, man. Gyro Man's new room doesn't add much to the fight. It is appreciated. The haphazard layout does work, and the fights benefit for increasing Gyro's threat level. Honestly, I think the music choice might be my least favorite thing with the level. It's so obnoxious that it further sapped any fun I could have had. I think I was grateful the stage was just over by the end of it. Repeated visits for getting the review and score quickly led me to the mute button. I like the music. What the heck? The stage was fine. I did have to use Rush Jet to bypass some of the more annoying platforming, but it was fine. I've honestly seen worse. And played worse. So... oh, we only have 16 unspent tokens, so that could be enough for much. Alright, well, that's all for this one. Thank you guys for watching. I will talk to you later. See ya.